Now, to talk more on this, we have Mr. Tony Gosling with us. He's an investigative journalist from Bristol. Mr. Gosling, nice to see you again. Mr. Gosling, it seems that the relations between the EU and Donald Trump is further falling apart, and now Germany also showed its discontent towards Washington. Why do you think Berlin took such a stance?
Well, I'm not so sure that there's a discontent towards Washington's new regime. But Friedrich Merz, although he's won, the way it works in Germany is nobody really wins. It's not like you can get a majority as you can here in Britain in the first past the post system. There probably will be no government in Germany until a couple of months' time at Easter, because they have to put together a coalition. And the way they do this is rather interesting nowadays, because they will probably go with any other party other than Alternative for Deutschland, which has now got about 80% of the 20% of the vote. So but they will not work with them. Alternative for Deutschland is a nationalist party which is branded around Europe anyway as far right. Really, it does have far right elements, some, but mainly it's a nationalist party. And all the other parties are non-nationalist parties. So if you think about, so for example, the United States blowing up the Nord Stream pipeline, which was a joint venture with the Swiss and the Germans and the Russians, nobody in Germany dares mention this because none of them are really nationalistic. So they won't stick up for their own national interest. They're globalists, and they're in with a global organization called the World Economic Forum, etc. So these globalists are being elected all over Europe. Our own Prime Minister Starmer is one of them. And so the people in Germany are getting very little choice. And the way that the nationalist party, the AFD, Alternative for Deutschland, has been driven down in the polls is by really smearing them as just as far right. Now, the number of migrants in Germany is enormous. 5% a year of the population. In 2023, they had 5% of the population of Germany were new migrants into the country just in 1 year. And so this is an enormous issue. And there are peaceful marches. I saw one myself in East Germany against this migration, but it's as if none of the parties that they can bring in are going to make very much of a difference to this. So what happens is the old-fashioned left and right parties, the big parties, get together in a coalition, as a similar thing has happened in Ireland, by the way, because they are both globalist parties, even though they're left and right, to shut out the nationalists. And this means that you get a kind of globalist government, whatever you vote for, almost.
Okay, Mr. Gosling, do you think the Europeans, regarding the Ukraine war, do you think the EU could take on Russia without the backing of Washington, thus needing to adhere to whatever Trump says or wants?
No. I think it's totally impossible and impractical. They will, of course, carry on a war of words through psychological warfare, through abuse of the press and the media. And of course, there's been a lot of censorship right across Europe and the United States. For example, shutting out your own channel, Press TV, which most people in Asia can watch, but people in Britain here certainly cannot watch. It's been banned. Banned by the regulators, but also banned by the privatized networks that own and control the satellites. And so really the debate about this isn't allowed to happen because the TV media is so controlled. But I think it's quite clear the European population, they are definitely not up for having a war with Russia. They wouldn't join the army. They would probably leave the army if armies started to take on Russia. And we've seen, for example, here, our own Prime Minister Keir Starmer last week saying British troops may be going as peacekeepers to Ukraine. Well, he's living in on another planet. He's in another world. This is never going to happen because, of course, they wouldn't be peacekeepers. You have to have a neutral force. The British Army special forces have been in Ukraine already, fighting the Russians and helping the Ukrainians kill Russians. So they couldn't be there as a peacekeeping force. So there's a lot of delusion and bamboozling of the public going on through the mass media here in Europe. And that's all they can continue to do, because I think any kind of real confrontation with the Russians is simply not going to happen. And we keep getting this phrase in Europe, all over Europe, a full-scale invasion of Ukraine by Russia. A full-scale invasion. This is rubbish. There has been no full-scale invasion. There's been a special military operation, they call it, which is very, well, it's killing as few civilians as possible. It's very slow, very, very careful kind of operation. If Russia was to do a full-scale invasion of Ukraine, it would be over within a few weeks. They would have taken over, and we would have seen that. So the propaganda is all they've got to go on, I think, in Europe against Russia now.
There you have it, Mr. Tony Gosling, investigative journalist from Bristol. Mr. Gosling, as always, thank you for your time, sir.